Hello, you have a prepaid call from
Keith Jesperson,
Bruce Davis,
Patton Clark, Robert Barno.
What's your friend?
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of The Lighter Side of Serial Killers. I'm your host, Keith Rovere. Happy Halloween! For a true crime fan, it's the most wonderful time of the year. I mean, we got Terrifier 3, we got Art the Clown, and today, who else am I going to have on other than the vampire of Paris himself, Nico Claux? Had a really good conversation. Many different topics we cover, and I don't want you to wait any longer. So why don't we just jump right into it and talk to the man himself, the vampire of Paris, Nico Claux. Well, first of all, how you doing? You look good.
I'm good. Busy.
Good. I can see. Every time I go on your social media page, you do. I mean, one thing I guess we can start talking about, I've seen, I guess it was called the Serial Killer Exhibition.
Yes.
And I guess you have like some kind of special chat session, I guess you're doing there too. But can you tell a little bit about what the exhibition is and what your part of it is?
Okay. So 3 years ago, I was approached by an Italian company called Italmostre. They're specialized in exhibitions. They do pharaohs, dinosaurs. They do plenty of different exhibitions in Italy, and they wanted to start a tour of several items that belong to serial killers. So this includes not only art and letters and things like that, but also actual, for example, murder weapons, which are really extremely rare to find. At the time, I was selling a freezer that was used for cannibal crime. So they purchased the freezer, and they also contacted several collectors that I know, and they purchased a few other things, a chainsaw, plenty of different things. And with time, the collection grew, and now it's a full exhibit that goes around Europe. So it's been touring Italy at first. Now it's in London, right in central London, not far away from the Big Ben, actually. It's very popular. There's lots of visitors. It's the first of its kind. The first time that there has ever been a thing like that, a traveling exhibition with murder, not only murderabilia, but also recreations of murder scenes. There's a full-sized dioramas, crime scene reenactments, plenty of different aspects of true crime. Of course, it's focused on serial killers, but not only. They're also talking about capital punishment. They're also talking about what's it called? Forensics, investigation, plenty of things that people they seem to actually love it. It's the first time that there's something like this, not only in Europe, but I think in the world. There's never been anything like this before. There are crime museums around the world. There are a few in the US, there are a few in Europe. Usually they're attached to a town. They don't usually travel. The collections never travel. And usually they focus on a few local killers. For example, most of the stuff you find in the US, it's only American serial killers, and it's only the centered on the 5 most popular: Gacy, Ramirez, Bundy, etc. And the thing with this exhibition, which is really special, is that there's more than 100 serial killers featured in the expo. That's important. More than 1,000 objects, 100 killers, and people usually spend 4 hours inside. So and they come back. So pretty popular.
Oh, that's great. Now you have part of it. Are you part of every single show? Because I know one part you had like some kind of chat session, or you can it was like a Q&A with you at least for one of them, or is that something for
Yeah.
every show?
So we're trying to. I try to be there at least for the opening and the ending of each expo. Each expo lasts 3 months. Sometimes I pop up in between. For the Paris one, of course, since I live nearby, I will be more present. I will attend the weekends. For London, I was the first 2 days, and I will be there for the last 2 days. Normally, I should be there for the last 2 days. And yes, it's Q&As, or I answer people's questions, and sometimes I take time to actually talk with people. And there's people who've been following me on social media for quite some time, so I always try to take some time to at least spend 10 or 15 minutes with people that I actually know through social media. The rest, yes, it can be quite busy, so you know, be there for everyone. But well, people ask me for signatures and photos and stuff like that.
Mhm. Now, is there any plans to take it to America?
Yes, definitely.
Good.
First, it will be touring Europe, and once that the promoter is ready, he has plans on making it to the US for at least a couple of years, I guess.
Good.
It's up to him, but I'm pretty sure it will be very popular in the US. Yes.
Oh, sure. No, I'm looking forward to seeing it myself for sure.
Yeah.
I know for me, I mean, both of us, but especially for me, like I have built relationship with serial killers, those for me for the past 10 years. They send you stuff and you
Yeah.
get to know them. But what people don't realize that you actually, I mean, they expect that like they're these big bad boogeymen that like live under a rock. They're not expecting to have like a conversation like I'm talking to you. And I've built great relationships up
Yeah.
with some men and women over the years. Who have you, I mean, over the years doing it, I don't know how much time you have to do it now, but have you built any relationships throughout your life, like talking one-on-one to them that you like, not just not a necessary connection with, but you built a little relationship with, that you can, some of them really
You
stick
could
out to
say
you.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah. I've corresponded with about 30 inmates when I was myself in prison. So there's a few that I got along quite well with. I would say Sei Sagawa is the most obvious, because we exchange a lot of letters. Also Richard Ramirez and a few others, Dot Clark. Most of those guys are dead now. So, you know, Archer Cross, David Gore. It was in the 90s and early 2000s. So yes, most of them are dead or executed. Never got the chance to send a letter to Dahmer, but Dahmer got killed with the same year I started to correspond with killers. So could have been a thing too. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask you next. If anybody that from the past, doesn't have to be American, but around the world, who would you really have gotten to like to know? Like certainly Dahmer. I mean, I can speak to that myself. But is anybody
Yeah.
that you're like, man, I really wanted to talk to him and get to know him or her for that matter?
So if it weren't for the language barrier, it would be a guy from Kazakhstan that's called Nikolai Jumagarev. I covered this case in one of my recent books about Russian cannibals. For me, it's one of my favorite cases of all the cases I've studied so far. Him and another Russian guy that's called Bishkov. They're really fascinating cases, and that's the ones I would like to, have a chat. Maybe
Yeah.
Pichushkin, but he's dead. Pichushkin was a chessboard killer. It's Russian too. Usually, well, that's because I wrote 3 books on the subject so far, but I found the Russian ones to be more interesting than the American ones in terms of motivations, body count, and just their mind is way more complex, if I may say. So that would make for very interesting conversations, I guess.
Who do you think, as far as countries go, I mean, most of us think of the, like you said, the popular American serial killers, with a few maybe overseas. Do you have a sense of what country kind of has the most violent offenders, or most serial killers specifically, or maybe the worst of the kind? Because we mostly just know, like I said, the American ones. But you have written
Yeah.
books, and we'll get into some of your books too, that you're very more familiar with, around the world. But what do you think is the place that has maybe the most or the most horrific?
Russia, definitely. It
Oh,
comes in second after the US. Officially speaking, there were more than 200 serial killers over the past century. Most of the files were hidden by the Soviet government because they didn't want the West to know that they had this problem with serial offenders, but they had the exact same problem than the US, which is kind of interesting because it's a completely different culture. China probably has a lot that they don't talk about or that they try to hide. Southeast Asia has a lot of serial offenders too. It's hard to know actually. Or South America, of course, they have lots that we never hear about. And it's easier in the West and the US to actually know numbers and identify missing victims, etc., and so on. But for countries like Russia or China, it's really harder to find to discover, to find out about a serial killer who didn't cover their tracks because the it's so easier for them to hide the victims in a way. So especially Russia. So I'd say Russia comes second. Yeah.
there's a study done recently by a neuroscientist who studies psychopathy, and he was saying if you look at all the nations as a whole, his thing is you can't cure psychopathy, right? Pure brain abnormalities, but he's saying you can control violent offenders. Fish oil is one of the things that kind of decrease the urges, so to speak. And he did a study. I'm assuming it's correct that the nations and countries to eat twice their body weight in fish a year have a lot less violent crime, and the ones that don't barely eat any fish at all have a much higher crime rate. So that's something I'm curious to see if we could, some kind of study to see as far as serial killers go, if they land on, obviously the Asian serial killers have a lot more fish there, but some in other places that don't have that access. I'm like, there might be some truth to that. I don't know.
That's very interesting. But take a country like Japan, which has a very low crime rate. But compared to the statistics, if you compare the statistics to the crime rates, there's an unusually high number of serial killers in Japan compared to normal criminals. So why not? I mean, this could be a factor. Other things could be factors. What's interesting is that there are fewer cases of this kind of violence in societies that are centered around family values. Like for example, in Africa, take Africa, where you have very strong family values with people who have to provide for the elders, etc., and having leading some kind of I don't know, out of the norm life is way more difficult in those countries because they have a bigger fear of judgment, if you will. They have a bigger fear of being judged by their own family, by society, by the village when when it's tribal. So psychopathy is often linked with a lack of fear of judgment. So when you have this lack of fear of judgment, when you don't, you don't feel like you have to do things for others, that's the beginning of something there. If you understand what I mean. Most psychopaths and most people I knew in prison, they don't really care about being judged by their peers or by even by their own family. Some are. The most dangerous, if I may use that word, because I don't, it's difficult to judge the level of dangerosity of someone, even in prison. But I'd say the most dangerous people I've ever met in my life are people without family ties, without any kind of it's people who basically don't feel like they belong to any kind of community.
Yeah, like they have nothing.
Yeah, there's absolutely no ties. They have no religious community, no social community. They are lone wolves, if you will, and they only care about themselves. And their threshold is much thinner when they're about to commit a crime, because there's no consequences for them, moral consequences. They're the captain of their own ship, if you will.
Yeah.
They just don't care, and not caring at all, and living without any fear of being judged, whether by some higher powers or lesser powers like justice, or by their peers, or by their own family. Then you have there's a gap between those people and people who, I would say, normal people who have this fear in them, this fear of being not a good person. And it's all about that, it's all about, do these people really care about being a good person? I don't think they do. Sometimes they put some varnish over it, and they try to justify the murders by saying, okay, that person deserved that. If that person is the victim is a sex worker, they will say, oh, they all deserve that because they have diseases or whatever they think the excuse they have to justify their hatred towards this category of person that they hate. There's always some kind of shallow justification, but at the end of the day, I think the most dangerous people are the ones that they have no ties to anything.
Now, part of what I do is, prison outreach, rehabilitation, like what works and what doesn't work, basically. And my obviously studies mostly with violent offenders. And I found it interesting, and I really I believe in this. I don't know if you have heard about this or thought about this, but when you take somebody like that or a group of people like that, where fear is not going to be really a deterrent, well, when it comes to prison systems, well, it's all punish-based here in America. Norway and some of the European systems have switched it to a reward-based system. You're rewarded for behaving. And they have like the lowest recidivism rate in violent offenders, basically in the world, at least the ones that I've studied. North Dakota here in America, now it's not the most violent state, but they adopted that style. They have the lowest recidivism rate here in America, at least among violent offenders. California starting it. Have you ever given a thought to that, where if you're not deterred by fear, like BTK is an example, where they were controlling him by, oh, you'll get an extra dessert on your food plate, or you have extra phone time or extra visitation. They started behaving tremendously. Now, I don't know how that works in the outside world, but it seems to be there's some good logic to that, where if not deterred by fear, but reward is control them a little bit better.
We have the same kind of mentality in France. I wouldn't say it's a reward, because they don't give you any rewards, but most of the prison population is controlled by comfort. So, for example, they let you have a TV in your cell. Some people, some inmates, they have even a small computer in their cell. They can actually use that computer to watch movies or, play video games. But if there's any kind of bad behavior or anything, they just remove the TV, they just remove the computer, and the people and those guys they end up, in their empty cell just staring at the wall. So they use comfort as some kind of control tool. And the most dangerous people I've ever met in prison were people who didn't care about comfort. They could, in France, there's a lot of protests. French people are known for protesting for no reason. They always go in the street and protest against this, against that, against something that, happens in the government. But, protests, they only last 1 week. After that, they all go back home. Just because after 1 week, they don't get paid anymore. They don't get a salary anymore. So the government says, okay, they will make it last, because at the end of the day, they know that comfort is what makes people go back to their home and just accept the situation. It's the same for inmates in France. Norway, I knew a guy who was in Norway, and he could even go on walks in the forest, and he had killed a guy. He was serving, I think he was 15 or 16 years, and he was actually allowed to go in the forest 15 minutes a day or half an hour a day. So yeah, they have a very different way of seeing things. And yeah, maybe reward can work better than just punishment. At the same time, my feeling is that some inmates that they won't answer to that, and they only answer to fear. That's the only thing, because their brains are wired different. They don't care about comfort. They don't care about getting a better situation. They just care about setting the world on fire. That's the only thing they know. The only thing they know how to express what they have in them, and they're completely broken inside, completely damaged. Nothing will ever cure them of what's going on inside them. So unfortunately, it can work. Yes, it can work for some type of offenders. I don't think it can really work for people with extreme degrees of psychopathy.
Yeah, I think we're just barely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're just barely scratching the surface of it. I mean, there's just baby steps. There is no cure, obviously, but at least there's there's some things manageable, at least with the life of violent offenders. But like I said, we're barely even scratching the surface. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, people, that like schizophrenic, that just thought they were possessed by demons, and that was it. So we're barely scratching the surface of like MRI studies. And so, I mean, who knows, 200 years from now, who knows? But right now, like you said, it's not much. It's not much of anything we can do. Also on your website, I saw somebody I haven't heard of, Joseph the Ripper. Is a book that's available.
Case, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I figure I usually have a pretty good knowledge of most of them. I was like, I never heard of it. I have to look him up myself. What about him made you want to, get a book about him?
Well, first off, he's the very first, not the very first, but one of the very first French serial killers, and probably the very first copycat. So he was 19 years old when the Jack the Ripper murders happened in Whitechapel in London. And he was reading about the crimes in newspapers. Well, not really reading, because at the time most people, they couldn't read. So he heard about the crimes. Everybody was talking about the crimes, even in the most remote places in France. It's one of those events at the end of the 19th century that was major, and we're still talking about Jack the Ripper nowadays. So imagine back then, it was everybody was talking about that, and it's not clear when he decided to act out on his murder fantasies. Probably being in the army didn't help. He tried to kill himself. He shot a bullet in his head, but the bullet lodged itself inside the ear. So
Wow.
his hearing was damaged, and his facial nerve on one side were totally damaged, and he was partly paralyzed on that side. He couldn't find a work, so he started to go from town to town, more or less like a vagrant, trying to find odd jobs here and there in working in the fields. And his murderous fantasies grew stronger and stronger. And he started to assault and kill young shepherds, mostly women, but also men, boys, girls, even all the victims. What's fascinating about the case is that the attacks were extremely violent. So he disemboweled them, he mutilated them, he committed post-mortem sexual acts on them, and all those murders were recorded, and there were very lengthy autopsy reports on each case. There were 17 cases in total, and the murder spree lasted 3 years, 3 entire years. There was a few books written by the people who prosecuted him and the people who interviewed him in prison. They were in French, so I decided to write a book in English about the case because it had never been done before. And I found plenty of news reports from the time, but also the autopsy reports. So I used all that to write the book, and I'm kind of proud of that book because it's a case that is extremely interesting, and the confessions themselves are interesting because it was the first time, I think, in the story of violent psychopaths that such a murderer was apprehended, so they could actually interrogate him and try to know more about his motives. You know, Jack the Ripper was never arrested, so nobody knew what was inside his head. But this guy, Joseph Vacher, he was arrested. There was a lengthy prosecution, lengthy trial. So we know more or less why he committed the crimes and exactly what he did to them. So from a criminology perspective, it's extremely interesting.
So was he open about why he did certain things? So that's all in the book too, of his explanation about things?
Yes, it's in the book.
Oh, good.
Yeah, he didn't explain everything, but he described each attack. He said exactly how he did it. But he talked about the motives a bit, but some aspects of the murders, for example, the post-mortem assaults, he would never talk about them. He was too ashamed, probably.
Yeah.
So, but the autopsy reports are there to tell exactly what he did to those persons. So it's pretty graphic. Yeah.
You sold me. I'm sold. I'm picking that up tomorrow. It's funny when I mentioned I'm going to have you on. A lot of people, I did a lot of questions that people when he asked you, when you asked a few of them already.
Yeah, sure.
But one was I see now it's a special edition, the Cannibal Cookbook that's on there.
Yeah.
What makes this now? I saw it a special edition. Is it just something added to it for what makes one, special edition, so to speak? At least that's what the website had on there.
It's signed and there's my blood on it. So this is a collector.
Oh, it's for signed copies. Oh, definitely.
But there's a follow-up. I wrote the Cannibal Cookbook 2 recently with more recipes and plenty of other stuff inside. And I think it's
that's good.
with my wife. She had me. She's making signs to to remind me that she was a huge part in the making of the book. But she had me with the recipes. We adapted
good.
them from actual confessions. So no, it's an interesting new edition. Maybe it's longer than the first one and maybe more graphic, but yeah.
I have never cooked human flesh.
Oh yeah, no, my wife has never cooked human flesh, so but she's a good cook, so she could.
Sure.
Yeah.
I could have made me turn.
Yeah. But we covered Australians. We covered plenty of different other ones that weren't in the first edition. Yeah.
Oh, definitely good. And one of the questions people wanted me to ask you is, from yourself, when you first thought about tasting it, tasting human meat yourself, can you take us inside your mind of one that, like, it's almost like saying someone had mentioned like a vegan tasting bacon for the first time, or meat, like the thought process of, oh, I can't even imagine tasting that, and do you remember like your very first time? What was the process like for you to try it? And was it from like working at the morgue? And you mentioned before about sometimes that's where you get it, with the body like a day or two old. What was your first experience like with that?
It wasn't so much about the taste, because people ask me all the time about the taste. It was about the experience itself and the fact of doing it. It was not only symbolic for me, it was a symbolic thing to do, because I was in this process of, pushing the limits, doing things, and that, separated me from the rest of humankind, if you will. And I often compare it to cutting the cord that tied me to humanity by doing this. So, but it was more of a spiritual experience and a rush. It was a huge rush for me, adrenaline kick, if you will. And it became very addictive. It's not only the taste itself, but the act of doing it became extremely addictive, and the rush it gave me. So, the psychiatrists, when they studied the case and they interrogated me, they compared the fact of feeling full of energy and feeling so much stimulated and wanting more and more and more to what they call a manic phase. Manic phase in when you're in a psychotic phase. The manic phase is that you have some kind of it's like you're on speed all the time. Your brains the wheels inside your mind are working full speed, and maybe it's the connections inside the brain. I don't know where it happens, but you really feel like you live life much more intensely than usually. You're more sensitive to smells, to taste, to all those things, and to all the stimulations around you. So when your mind is focused on one thing, and for me it was doing this, the manic episode made it more like, intense, if you will. So that is the intensity that I was looking for. It was not about being a gourmet chef or people are so, and I understand that, because it's a huge taboo, and they maybe it's a nice breaker too, because they, the act itself is so off limit that people try to break the ice by trying to find some common experience, which is taste. So they ask, how does it taste like? Because they want to have the common reference. Even if I tell you, okay, this for me more or less tasted like horse meat, but even if I tell you that, first of all, maybe you've never eaten a horse meat in your entire life, so that would be hard to visualize. But second, it would be just one small part of the experience itself,
Yeah.
which is taste,
That makes sense.
limited to taste. It's like, and it will tell you how I felt actually,
Yeah.
which was the result of a manic episode, which was an overwhelming sense of it being overstimulated, if you will.
Sure.
And Ramirez, when he was killing those people, it was only during those coke binges. He would never do it sober. Dahmer, when he was killing those people, he was always drunk. Bundy too. Gacy, I'm not sure about that, but I think he was smoking weed all the time. That's for sure. I know that. So there's this, idea that you have to dull your senses in a way, or to be in another altered state. For me, it wasn't drugs because I wasn't using drugs. I wasn't drinking a lot, and I still don't. I'm not a drinker. I'm a very small social drinker, but all those stimulations, they were coming from another state of mind, if you will, which was, according to psychologists and psychiatrists who followed me, a manic episode. Not personally convinced it was a manic episode. I think it was something else, but that's the scientific way to explain why my mind was working. Was working differently.
Yeah, it makes sense. Obviously, you mean you were maybe into it a little more deeper than most in a quote unquote true crime genre, but it's like the whole world is into true crime now. I mean, maybe the past 5 or 6 years, especially. For me, maybe for me and you, it's a different reason. But we're talking even like soccer moms, who are not really into much at all. They listen to podcasts, listen to my podcast, and especially a lot of a female population. Why do you think? I'm like, here's like Art the Clown. The Terrifier 3 has taken over the world in these gruesome movies. Yeah. And I saw, I think it was an original painting by you. They took kind of Pogo the Clown. You put art there. I think something that you did. It's on your website. And I mean, people are getting physically sick watching this movie, Terrifier 3. And I've seen the first two. I haven't seen the third yet. But it's still taken over the world. But true crime in all in all, with serial killers, why do you think now, at least for the past 4 or 5 years and still growing, everybody's so fascinated? They can't get enough of true crime. But it wasn't always like that, but now it's everywhere.
I think this new generation, they have been raised with movies like Silence of the Lambs. They have been raised with all those movies where the serial killer as a character was a central arc, in fiction. And you could not find any series on TV where there wasn't a serial killer at some point. The X-Files and all those series in the 90s and the early 2000s. So this generation grew up with having the serial killer as a central character in fiction, which never happened before. There were psychopaths in movies, etc., but there were not, Columbo never had an episode with a serial killer. See what I mean? And the 18 neither. And so all those very popular series in the 2000s, they had to have a serial killer in the show. So this is one of the first reasons, I think. The second reason, that's what I find fascinating, is the time gap. All those crimes that happened like 50 years ago. Bundy 50 years ago, Gacy 50 years ago, Dahmer 30 years ago, Ramirez 40 years ago. There's more than a generation. Okay, what's extremely fascinating, I think, is the first time in the history of mankind where there's an entire generation who wasn't even born when those crimes happened, which cultivate, if you will, a fascination for what they perceive as fictional characters. They aren't fictional characters, but for them, it's like they were content creators in the 70s, and they're consuming the contents now. See what I mean? I know it's a weird way of saying it, but believe me, my position being in this serial killer expo, I meet people that I would never believe would go to that kind of expo. Normal people,
Yeah.
average people, but they all have this little thing for true crime. Some of them, they have a very shallow interest in the genre, but still they want to see the Dahmer glasses. They want to see them.
Yeah.
They want to approach those objects. They want to see them for real, and it's interesting for me. It's I don't know. Maybe it's a trend now. I took that with John Borowski once, the director, and we did all those commentaries on serial killers, and he did one on Gacy recently that was released on the DVD recently and Blu-ray. He asked me once, Nico, do you think that this will last? Do you think that this trend will last? And honestly, the way I see it, I think it will last at least another generation. Maybe then it will fade away. But this new generation, the kids who are now 15, even younger than that, and they have all of them, they have their own favorite serial killer when you ask them, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't see it. Yeah, I don't see it ending anytime soon. What might end? And I was talking to producers recently who are trying to. They consulted me because they wanted to know what would be the next new trend in. It was kind of funny that they asked me, but they consulted me because they wanted to know what would be the new trend in serial killers and true crime, because they want to invest in a new show. So I told them about Gim, obviously, because Gim will be the subject of this the third season of Monsters, the Ryan Murphy show, and I gave them a few ideas to do a documentary on the subject that would not be like any other documentary that has ever been made on Gim. I have a few ideas, but now all those TV producers, etc., they're trying to find new ideas. So this is why, for me, it's important with with this window that is the serial killer exhibition, to show that it's not only the 5 main guys, it's not only about Gacy, Bundy, etc. There's others. I've never seen a good documentary on Richard Chase, for example, which for me was one of the most fascinating cases ever, because it's not only about the case itself, it has a lot of, it's extremely interesting about why would you put to death or sentence to death somebody who's obviously mentally ill, and he was obviously mentally ill. Richard Chase, there's absolutely no doubt that he was not mentally ill. You cannot be more demented than this guy. And there's other names, there's other countries, as we said earlier. So I think the future of true crime and true crime entertainment, because we are in the era of true crime entertainment. People don't really realize that. They're talking about documentaries. They're not watching this as documentaries. See what I mean? That's their excuse to watch it.
Yeah.
But the real motive is entertainment. They want to be entertained. They want to watch a good story. And I think the future of true crime entertainment will be lesser known cases and foreign cases. Yeah, I absolutely believe that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned favorite serial killers. I guess the trend now, and I've seen a couple people, and I should have took a picture. I didn't, or took a screenshot. They're having a Halloween party, so when everybody dresses up, but dresses up as their favorite serial killer. I've seen you twice. Twice I've seen a Nico costume. I don't know if you've seen it. Both had the drill, and one had like the shaved head, had the goatee. One had the drill, and Richard Ramirez book. Yeah, I know. I should have screenshot. I got to try to find it to send it to you. I mean, that's something growing up, that one day you're going to be a Halloween costume. But twice I've seen it so far.
I have to sell drills now.
I know.
That's funny.
Just a few more questions for you. How would
Yeah.
you like to be remembered when people look back, 50 years or so? Obviously you've done a lot, obviously some negative, but tons of positive. But what would you kind of like your when people think of you and the name Nico Claux, what would you like? How would you like to be remembered?
I know what I will be remembered for, which is the criminal aspect. But what I would love to be remembered for is to be remembered for my work as an author, trying to explain the mind of a person with antisocial personality disorder. Because for me it's important, and this is why I spend so much time answering the questions when I'm at the exhibitions. People come to see me from different perspectives. There was this woman, for example, she came to me and she was listening to me on the side, talking to another person, and when that person left, she came to me and she said, I have to tell you something. I really appreciated what you said, because my father is a psychopath, and I really suffered from how he behaved when I was a child, and it helps me to know that there is another way out of violence. So when she told me that, of course, I felt it felt really good, because even if people are criticizing the fact that I'm doing this, and they say, "Oh, it's exploitation or whatever," just the fact that I could help one person, that's good, and that's what I want to be remembered as. Maybe not, trying to help understand what it takes to transform a very seclusive introvert kid into what people perceive as a monster. And this is what I did by writing my biography, where I insisted a lot on my childhood, about the process of having intrusive thoughts, and about the social isolation as a kid, and how it built me as a criminal later. And people think that they have some kind of understanding of the criminal mind through very biased tools. For example, profiling. I think for me, profiling as defined by the FBI and the people who founded VICAP and all those tools, they're very biased, and it's just a very smooth scalpel, blunt scalpel to dissect the human mind, and very outdated. And I think that people need other perspectives. And this is another reason why I like to publish books written by killers, like the Segawa book. I published his biography called In the Fog. And In the Fog is a fascinating book. It really shows you what this guy was going on through in his life at the time, many years before the murders, how the murder fantasies built up. Each step is described in very disturbing details. The crime itself, which is an extraordinary crime, not extraordinary, I mean good crime, of course, but out of the ordinary. The crime itself is, there's only been one crime like that before, the Segawa crime. The extent to which he mutilated and played with the remains of his victim for over a week. All this is described in the book, and what was going on through his head, through his mind, were in every step of the crime. So for me, it's important to have this book published and read by students of abnormal criminology, because we're not talking about basic criminology, and this is abnormal criminology. It's another field in itself. You know, there's no 20 Jeffrey Dahmers. There's no 20. You know, each of those serial killers or killers are unique, and they have some similarities, but they're still very different from each other. And it's, for me, important to give them a voice when they can express themselves, because if you just let them rot inside a prison cell without a mean of explaining why they did those things, then those things will happen again. And those kids who feel the same way, they have no tool, no way of learning that there's other ways to channel their macabre fantasies or morbid fantasies. There's other ways to do that. So yeah, I want my work to be remembered for that, mostly.
That's good. You know, some of the other work, like when we're looking back in somebody's life or looking forward to death, so to speak, you studied a lot about religion. I'm not, you're not a specifically religious person, but you studied a lot about occults. Like for me, you know, I'm a Christian guy. I believe in heaven and hell, Jesus is God, the only way to salvation. That's for me. And all the mainstream religions kind of have the same thing. It's our way or not. You know, our way or the high. Like one, it's just like everybody's wrong or only one is right with the mainstream religions. I'm curious because as much as I study mainstream religions, I don't know much about the occult part of things. Is it similar in that aspect to where in the mainstreams it's our way and everybody else is wrong? Or is it completely different mindset? You know, because not always a heaven and hell dynamic in a different occults, a little bit that I know. Is it similar to where they all say they have their own way? Or is it like it's for you to find your own journey? How do those work, so to speak?
I think it's the same for, you know, I've talked a lot with extremely religious people, and the most interesting conversations I've had were people, extremely religious people who had a place in their heart for doubt. And I think that doubt is extremely important when you have faith in something. If you don't have doubt, and if you refuse to intellectually go to that way and doubting yourself and doubting your belief, then you're not balanced. You're lacking something. And it is the same for people who practice the occult. I know people who are extremely stubborn. They believe in one paradigm. They believe in one thing. They will not try to study other occult practices. They stick to their own little thing, and they have like horses who have how do
The blinders.
you call that?
The blinders.
Yeah. They're blinders. They see no other thing that this thing that they believe in. When you're a student of the occult, we call it the left-hand path because of the tradition, the right hand and the left hand. But most people who practice the left-hand path, they try to learn new or other cultural forms of the left-hand path. For example, say, if I'm European, of course, I will study European grimoires, but I'm also extremely aware of what goes on in America. I'm aware of the Satanic Bible, which is an American system. It's not European at all. It's two different things when you're talking about, say, Satanism, for example. The American Satanic Bible is very American for the European. It's more about American culture than Satanism. Yeah.
That's America. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll screw everything. If only American can screw up the Satan Bible. Only America can do that.
Yeah, exactly. Europeans have another way of seeing things. But for me, as a follower of the left-hand path, I also study, for example, Shiva worship and Hinduism, which is a totally different culture. But I think that in their approach to magic and energies, there are very interesting things in their culture. I can also study voodoo. I can study Santeria. I can study the cult of Santa Muerte. There's plenty of different things in each culture that I can study, take, etc. And even in classic Christianity, there's some very interesting elements. Myself, I do believe and I do think that it is important to leave a place for mystery. So when I'm talking about mystery, it's with a capital M. And it's a huge part of classic Christianity, mysteries, the mystery of Christ.
I agree.
Exactly. Mystery is something that we cannot comprehend, that science cannot comprehend, and that it is useless to try to comprehend. You just have to accept it.
We have a phrase like in Christianity, exactly what you say. I think people, there's so many denominations out there, you try to demystify the mystery. You try to say, this is what it is. No, you don't know.
No.
There is faith.
No,
I don't care
you
what
don't.
religion it is. There's faith, but you can't demystify the mystery.
Exactly. And I think that it becomes dangerous when you try to give certainties to things that are beyond human comprehension. Because you just there's a phrase I like to use, a word that I like to use a lot regarding religion, is the word anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism is trying to, and it's a human trait that everybody has, is trying to give human traits to something which is not human. And the most common anthropomorphism is when you have a pet, for example, a cat. I've had cats, I've had dogs, etc. You try to give them human characteristics that they don't have. You know what I mean? Of course, they love you, the pet, or they have this special bond with you, but it's not human love. You cannot project your feelings, you cannot project your human feelings and your human psyche in something that is not human. It's the same for God for me, and that's my belief. I do not think that the creation or the creator is an extension of man, because if you accept the fact, and this is interesting. We're doing there's a special science for this kind of talk. It's paraphysics. I don't remember exactly where. Well, it's talking about spirituality, but on the very theoretical level. But if we consider a creator that reigns over everything in the universe, I think it's very simplistic to project your human feelings to that creator. You see what I mean? So that's my belief. But I can understand that people project themselves in a creator that they perceive as their father, because they created them equal. I can understand that, but for me, I cannot accept, and it's just my way of thinking, but I cannot accept that such a power would be limited to human thoughts and to human human
Mhm.
feelings, because at the end of the day, all we see about the world is limited to our five senses.
You're
So
right. Oh, I
that would
agree with you.
mean that,
Yeah.
so that
Mhm.
would mean that the creator would be limited by his five senses. That would
Yeah, you're right.
mean that he only has five senses.
That's why Christianity gets into a lot of trouble, because they're doing
Yeah,
exactly what you said. But if you read, read the scripture, it says don't do that. I mean,
Mm,
because as soon as you, like I said, God is so above our ways. If God is
yeah,
sovereign and in control of everything, they say, why is there evil? Well, you can't comprehend that. That evil thing might happen for a perfectly good reason that we can't comprehend that. And the second, I mean, granted, if you going by the scripture, okay, the Holy Spirit impregnated a lady named Mary, out came Jesus, this and that. Aside from that, the second you try to put anything to God in a human or any type of form, you've already destroyed the term God, this all being,
yeah,
all knowing, everywhere thing. As soon as you try to put any image to it, you've already, I'm not going to say offended him, but that's not what God is. If God is the creator of everything, he is everywhere and everything. You can't start putting forms to that. It doesn't work.
yeah,
You're, like I said, you're demystifying the mystery, and you're trying to make God you. Basically, what we try to do is put ourselves in the place of God, of course, I mean, you mentioned, most people think, even about organized religion, this probably all came from somewhere. There's probably, that's like nothing plus nothing doesn't equal something. So something, probably some kind of eternal something, probably created the first thing, and then here we go spiraling down the line. But you're right. But when we try to demystify that mystery of what quote unquote God is, that's when you get in trouble.
yeah,
You get in trouble right away as you start thinking that.
yeah.
And I mean, for
For
yourself.
me,
Mhm.
and it's important to say, because people see Satanism, or the way it's preached, or the way it's expressed by the media, and the satanic panic, for example, in the 80s, as a celebration of everything that is evil. The European way of, of living as a Satanist is not seeing the life in terms of good and evil. It's life in terms of what is good for you.
Mhm.
See what I mean? And Satan in Hebrew means adversary. That's
Mhm.
the meaning of the word in Hebrew. Um, it's not being an adversary to God, and this is what people. This is what gets people confused. It's not being an adversary to nature or God or creation. It's being an adversary to mankind, and the way it's organized, and the way, especially the way it organizes power and controls the masses.
Mhm.
So for a Satanist, for example, most organized religion are a tool invented by primitive governments, primitive rulers, to exert some kind of control over the masses. Then it became more and more sophisticated, etc., 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 and with books, with dogmas, etc. But I think that at the core of this for Satanists, the problem is not the creation. The problem is the messengers.
Mhm.
It's not the message, it's the messengers. The messengers who pervert the message for
Mhm.
their own agenda, which can be political, which can be, there's always a problem with the messenger and how he uses the message for his own agenda. So at the end of the day, spiritual persons always connect, I think, in a way. I've had very interesting interactions with spiritual people from all sides,
Mhm.
Buddhists, Jewish, many different religions. And each time there was something. But then there are people who are totally stubborn in their religion, and they see you as
Mhm.
totally evil, and there's absolutely no communication. So yeah, that's the
Yeah, I
thing.
mean, most religions should, have the basic common ground of love one another. Yes, there's,
Yeah.
people who do bad things, evil, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that's the common foundation is even if you think somebody is wrong, well, okay, we can agree to disagree. Now let's go get a pizza.
Mhm.
Let's go. We can still be friends and have a lot of other things we have in common. Do you ever thought, like, in your mind, like, what happens when we die? Do you think it's just ball game over, or you think there's another realm or another? What is your personal thought of when that time comes? Is there anything else, or is it that is it? We're done.
What from my experience working in the deaf industry, I've worked there for nearly 15 years.
Yeah, you'll be an expert. That's right.
Yeah, I've seen my share of dead people, more than 10,000. I didn't, yeah, I estimated that I've seen more than 10,000 people in my lifetime, dead people,
Wow.
I mean. So that's a lot. I worked in a palliative institute, which means that it was people who actually were dying.
Okay.
You got some kind of special energy in those places. And I use the word energy on purpose because for me, it's a matter of energy. We are energy as human beings. Some of them think that we have souls. What is a soul? I don't know. What makes you as a person? It what defines you. For me, it's an energy. This energy, when you die, it goes somewhere else.
Mhm.
I believe that it goes in what you've done through your lifetime. So when you're a musician, famous musician, goes into your music. As a writer, I hope, and as a painter, I hope there's a bit of soul of me in my paintings, and they would survive me.
Mhm.
They of course they survive in your lineage when you have kids. So this soul, this piece of you survives what you do throughout life. And when do you really die? I don't know. Is it the last time that somebody on earth says your name?
Mhm.
That's maybe the when you really die.
Yeah.
And some people never die; they're immortal. Genghis Khan,
Mhm.
Napoleon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's immortality, being
Yeah.
famous or infamous.
Mhm.
You know, I'm going to get dark again, but
It's
people
Halloween
don't
season. Right?
remember. People don't remember in the year 1888 of who was the mayor of London, but they sure remember who Jack the Ripper was.
Yeah. You're right. 100%.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
No doubt about it.
So, what's the moral of this? Uh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but what I know is that um, what makes life interesting is mystery.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
at
definitely.
the end of the day. Yeah.
That's what I think. Even people can disagree on religion. It's like, even if you don't know what's on the other side, well, you have this life now. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a discussion, but what are you doing now? That's why I
Yeah.
try to help as many people as I can, not to make the world a better place, but just try to help others as much, encourage others, especially those like even the life of Jesus itself. There's a Bible verse.
Mm.
He was kind to the ungrateful and to the evil. People ask me why I do
Yeah.
what I do. Well, because he was kind to the ungrateful and to the evil. So I mean that's why I've
Yeah.
been so involved in prison outreach is because no one else cares. No one else is reaching out to
Mm.
them. It's hard to get churches going to a nursing home to help the elderly, let alone to prisons to really encourage those who need it there. I think that's to me, that's like that. The more of all the stories is be as nice as you can to everybody. But anyway, as we
Mm.
wrap up, you have the Sirical exhibition. Any other
Yeah.
projects that you want to say? Anything you're working on? We can get people involved. I got serialkillerpleasures.com, the website.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to mention to look out for?
Yeah, I'm working on the biography of Jack Unterweger. Jack Unterweger was an Austrian serial killer who was the second famous guest of the Cecil Hotel. in LA.
Mm-hmm.
You know the place. So
Yeah.
he's mostly known in the US because of that. Because of course there was Ramirez on the what was it the 14th floor, I think. But Jack Unterweger was also a host, a guest of the Cecil Hotel, and he wrote a biography when he was in prison. So I will be releasing that for the first time in English. Very, very looking forward to that, and other books, other projects. And yes, we definitely. Oh yes, I'm also will be in Tennessee in January for a true crime and paranormal convention
Nice.
in Lebanon, Tennessee. So it will be the first convention I attend in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how it goes. And there's that. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time. We really
Thank you for
appreciate it.
having me.
And we appreciate it, definitely. Well, you take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You take care.
Well, there you have it. My conversation with Nico Claux. Very intelligent man. I mean, he's very bright, very intelligent. I mean, people think, you know, when you get into serial killer talk and those who've committed murders, like these big bad boogeymen who like, oh, me like to kill. No, like look at Ted Bundy. You know, he's going to be an attorney. You know, he probably would have been, you know, if he didn't get caught for what he was doing. And Nico, I mean, he can talk philosophy with the best of them, religion, as we talked about. Highly intelligent and also very accessible. SerialPleasures.com is the website, but you reach out to him, follow him on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook. And if you have like a legit question, have any, I mean, he'll respond to you. He said he's very kind and courteous with his time. And he does custom artwork. If anything special you want him to do, he'll be happy to do it for you, you know, when he has the time. A lot of great stuff on his website. You got to check not just the books that he has, like skulls. You know, amazing artwork on the skulls. And a really cool John Wayne Gacy one. And we were talked about John Wayne Gacy's Pogo, the Pogo the Clown, that he made Art the Clown from Terrifier 3. I mean, it's the Halloween season. I mean, come on, you know, you got to have some kind of artwork from Art the Clown. But no, he was a great guy. I really appreciate his time. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of this Halloween season. And until next time, see ya.